Madam President, I move we suspend the quorum call, vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
And I also have 11 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet today during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of both the majority and the minority leaders. And I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to talk about the bill that I would have thought a few days ago would have been passed by now, the bill before the Senate, the bill that addresses this topic of modern-day slavery, the bill that came out of the Judiciary Committee in a unanimous fashion before it came to the Senate floor. And then there was no dissent that we should get right on the bill and pass it. I'm pleased to co-sponsor this bill, the Victims for Justice of Trafficking Act, both sexual trafficking and labor trafficking. This bill would help innocent victims of trafficking by creating grants for state and local governments to develop comprehensive systems to address these problems. In every state, we're told, and certainly in almost every city, if not every city, this is a problem. And this bill lets law enforcement in that problem, deal with that problem by giving them the tools they need to hold the people accountable who are forcing these violent crimes and violent living conditions and abuse of people's dignity in so many ways on people. Apparently, and approximately the 100,000 American children each year are victims of commercial sex and child prostitution and child trafficking, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's like so many numbers that we think of. I'd encourage everybody to think of any city they can think of that has 100,000 people. And most of us would see that as a big community and lots of people and 100,000 children every year. 100,000 children every year, not every decade, not every century, every year, and that's in the United States of America. That's not all over the world. I think most Americans would assume, well, if this is a problem, it's got to be a bigger problem in any number of countries than ours. But 100,000 children every year are the victims of this tragedy that we have among us. The Justice Department says that there's more human trafficking cases prosecuted by federal attorneys in Missouri's Western District. That's the district where the U.S. Attorney's Office is in Kansas City, Missouri. More human trafficking prosecutions in the Western District of Missouri than anywhere else in the country. I hope that means that the people in the Western District of Missouri that run that office are doing an extraordinary job, but I think it would be foolish for me to think it doesn't also mean that this is an extraordinary problem. You know, my house in Springfield, Missouri is in that Western District. Springfield, Joplin, Kansas City, places that you wouldn't think, okay, what's the #1 prosecution area for victims of human trafficking in the country? The Western District of Missouri. St. Louis, Missouri is also one of the top 20 cities, we're told, for human trafficking, according to the Department of Justice. These are bad statistics, as every single statistic that any of us could look at in our state. Of course, one case of human trafficking is one case too many. But we're not, unfortunately, talking about just one case. We're talking about lots of cases. Earlier this month, the FBI arrested a person in my state that was charged with transporting a minor across state lines with the intent to engage in prostitution. The FBI reported that the man involved was physically abusive, was verbally abusive, was emotionally abusive, was sexually abusive to this young person that he was using for himself and offering to others. This modern-day slavery should not be allowed to continue. The bill that's before the Senate right now, the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act, has been endorsed by 200 different advocacy groups, including the NAACP, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Exodus Cry, a Grandview, Missouri group, Rights for Girls, the National Association to Protect Children, the Fraternal Order of the Police, and the National Conference of State Legislators, and we can't vote on it here on the Senate floor. We can't get this bill on the president's desk. And why is that? Why, again today, did the minority refuse to provide the votes we needed to get from where we are to 60? And we did have a few members of that side join us this week, but we're still short of just let's deal with this problem. They say it's because there's a section in the bill that deals with the Hyde Amendment. Okay, the Hyde Amendment's been around now for parts of 4 decades. What does the Hyde Amendment do? The Hyde Amendment bans taxpayer-provided abortions. It's been one of the things we have done in the country to say, okay, there is vast disagreement on this, but because we understand there's vast disagreement, surely we're not going to take money from some taxpayers who are totally opposed to this and use it to pay for something they're totally opposed for. Well, there is a provision in this bill. It was there when the bill was voted out of committee. It was there when everybody voted to move to the bill, but suddenly it's a provision that nobody was aware of before. In fact, in the committee, Madam President, there was at least one amendment that amended the sentence right below this sentence. So are we not doing our job? Are we not reading these bills? Or are we just looking for a reason not to get anything done? Surely the Senate, in the last half a dozen years, has proven to the country that the Senate can be dysfunctional. Surely we don't need to continue to make that case. So let's get to work. Let's get down to business. Let's look at what needs to be done here. Let's see what we can do to set an example for the world. And frankly, Madam President, there were others here among our colleagues who had other amendments that we could have at least debated that would have talked about what could we do to carry this beyond our borders so that we deal with this modern day slavery, whether for labor or sex, modern day slavery in ways that this issue should be dealt with. I'd love to see the president step forward and encourage the leaders of his party to say, let's just give the 6 votes we need to vote on this. Let's move to a conclusion here and put this on the president's desk. I think without the language that some people now suddenly find objectionable, this bill wouldn't pass the House. But the bill will pass the House as it was reported out of committee if the Senate would pass it, and it would be on the president's desk, and there's nothing new there. Madam President, I just hope we get this done. I think people are ready to see the Senate work. Let's get this done. Let's get on with a budget for the first time in 7 years that we could join with the House of Representatives and say, okay, let's present a plan to the country of how we're going to get back to a balanced budget and what our priorities are. But one of our priorities should be to end the nightmare for victims of human trafficking. We can't do that unless we face reality and get on this bill.